Michigan's rock station, Q106.
Hey, I'm Q106's Terry Stevens. Capital City Comic-Con is coming back to the Lansing Center in downtown Lansing, June 30th through July 2nd. Once again, it has a star-studded lineup of geek culture celebrities. We're going to be talking to them in the weeks leading up to the big show. Our guest this time around, he is one of the most prominent artists for Simpsons, Disenchantment, and Futurama creator Matt Groening's Bongo Comics, Bill Morrison. Q106, what's your name? Where are you from?
Hi, this is Bill Morrison.
Bill Morrison, we know where you're from, man. You a Michigan guy, Lincoln Park, Michigan, and now you're a member of the Groening-verse, man. We are super stoked to have you at Capital City Comic-Con coming up June 30th through July 2nd.
And I am equally as stoked.
Hell yeah, man. So let's dig into it. Bill, an important question I'm going to ask you this afternoon is MSU or U of M, my dude?
Oh, it's a tough one. I got to go CCS.
You know what? Solid choice. That's just so you know, you're going to be rolling into Spartans country here in a few weeks. So
I know, and I'm fully prepared.
Okay, good deal. We had one of your fellow con people, Ming. Yeah, we realized that Ming Chen. Yeah, he's a U of M guy. So hopefully he survives the experience. So
I didn't know that.
Yes.
For anyone wondering, CCS is my alma mater, which was the College for Creative Studies in Detroit.
Gotcha. Okay, that scans then. We'll let that one slide. That's perfect. So Bill, let's dig into it, man. You go back into quite a ways in the Groening verse, and man, one of my favorite memories, okay, is when my kids discovered where all of Dad's jokes came from. They all came from Futurama. They finally learned what all of the things. Good news, everyone! They finally know where that came from when I started watching the show with them. So I think we have you to thank for that one.
Did they lose respect once they found out that they weren't actually your jokes?
No, they never had respect for me to begin with. I mean, let's not get too crazy here, man. But you also co-founded Bongo Comics with Matt Groening. So tell us about your relationship with him, man. What's your dynamic like with him?
Really good. Matt was, I would have to say, the greatest boss I've ever had. But he was also a good friend. I go way back, even before The Simpsons, with him, because I started in Hollywood working at an ad agency that specialized in movie poster advertising. And Matt used to be one of the freelance writers that they would call in to write copy for the posters. So I would sometimes find myself painting or drawing posters that had his, in the end, had his taglines on. So the one that I always remember is I did a poster for a horror movie called Blood Diner.
Okay.
And Matt wrote the copy line, which was, "First they meet you, then they eat you."
I love it. And that sounds like the sort of thing that I would see in the background of a poster in an episode of The Simpsons or Futurama.
Could be, yeah. That might be one of those Easter eggs if you freeze frame.
Right.
Do something like that, yeah. But that was our first collaboration. We weren't, really working together, but I used to see him in the hallways, when he would come in to do sessions where he had to view a film and then go back home and write a bunch of taglines. And we appeared on a couple of greeting cards together. We used to do these low-budget greeting cards for Paper Moon Graphics. And they were so low budget, we couldn't hire models. So those of us actually working on the art and the writing were sometimes, if it was a photographic card, we were the characters in the cards.
Surely those are still floating around somewhere.
They are. I bought up most of them to keep them off the market. Now, I think I've scanned a few and put them on Facebook, actually. So, yeah, they're out there.
Okay, very cool. So, in your time in the Groening verse, I mean, let's start with the mothership, I guess. Who was if you had to pick a top three. Who are your favorite Simpsons characters?
Well, I have different favorites for different reasons. So my favorite to draw is Radioactive Man because I am a frustrated wannabe superhero artist. My favorite to write is Homer because I think more like him, so it makes it easier to write. Lisa's really hard because I'm not as smart as she is.
Right. You got to love it when the
hard to
character
write.
is intellectually challenging you when you're trying to make them do the funny, for sure.
Yeah, and you have to have a thesaurus and a dictionary, and you have to have all that stuff at the ready when you're writing dialogue for Lisa, because you can think of what you want her to say, but then you got to think of how she would say it.
Right.
What sort of words she would use. And then I think I guess my overall favorite character, I know this is like saying, my favorite ice cream flavor is vanilla, but it's got to be Homer. Just like as a fan, just watching the show, Homer's I think he's the funniest animated character ever created.
Once again, when my kids discovered The Simpsons, they also learned where the other half of Dad's jokes came from.
Yeah.
I mean, the writing on that show has just been so top notch for so long. I think one of my go-to lines is, I have 3 kids and no money. Why can't I have 2 kids or 3 money and no kids? I mean, every time, just an endlessly quotable show.
Yeah. We did, for years at Bongo, we did an annual calendar called The Quotable Simpsons. And it was, just quotes from the show every day. It was like a page a day, one of those desk calendars.
Right.
And it was great. You could just, stuff that you'd forgotten from 20 years ago, and you'd flip the page up, and then, every morning flip up the page, and then there's one that is a classic that you've forgotten about.
The what would you note as your favorite, as one of your favorite episodes from the show?
I think one of my favorites, just because it sort of resonates, is 3 Men in a Comic Book.
Okay.
It's an early episode. It's the one where Bart and Milhouse and Martin pool their money together to buy a copy of Radioactive Man #1. And as a comic book collector, I really relate to that. And the idea of, 3 kids trying to own something together and share it, is obviously a stupid idea that's bound to go wrong, which it does. So I love that one. I love, there was a really good mystery called Black Widower. And it was an episode involving Sideshow Bob marrying, I can't remember if it was Patty. I guess it was Patty. Sideshow Bob marries Patty. And it kind of turns into this great mystery that Bart ends up solving. And I love the writing on that one was great. And also the animation. David Silverman did a lot of the animation himself. By that time he was directing, so he wasn't doing as much animating, but you can always tell a David Silverman scene when he actually animates it, because it's just got like an extra 20% of energy and crazy drawing, just really, really good stuff.
Love it. Love it. And then I got to ask you about, again, one of my all-time favorites, Futurama. Who are your favorite characters from that series?
Well, I worked as art director on the show, and before the show was even sold, Matt enlisted me to help him develop the pitch. So I was working on all the characters, coming up with designs and, refining his designs and getting, basically his pitch ready so he could go into Fox with images and, just really wow them. And so I got to be on the ground floor with Leela and Bender and Fry, all the, the main cast. And I have to say Leela is my favorite. I love her personality. I love what Katie Seagal did with her voice. I love her design. She's weirdly repulsive and sexy at the same time.
Yeah, I can get with that analysis.
Yeah, it's bizarre. But yeah, she's great. I just love Leela. Just the whole concept of Futurama is so great. It's like Matt watched. I'm not saying he did this, but it's always seemed to me like he watched Woody Allen's Sleeper, and then kind of did a different take on it. What if somebody from our time period gets frozen and then revived 1,000 years from now? What would their experience be like?
Right. No, that absolutely scans. And your favorite episode from that series?
My favorite episode is Roswell That Ends Well.
Yes.
And that, do you know that one?
Yes, I do.
So I created a comic book called Roswell Little Green Man, which is about the alien who survives the Roswell UFO crash. And so I had already done that comic by the time we started doing Futurama. And then Patrick Burns, J. Stewart Burns wrote this great episode. And I was the art director on the show at the time, so I got to be involved in designing some of the characters and some of the costumes that they wore. And one of the characters I designed was Mildred, Fry's grandmother. And I based her a little bit on a character that I have in my Roswell comic book. But all the imagery is the same time period as my book, and so it was just really fun working on that. Just doing sort of, I basically have kind of two main styles. I have my own style, and then I have my Matt Groening style. So I sort of got to draw the stuff that I had been drawing in my own style in the Matt Groening style. And that was just a lot of fun.
So when you were first developing that collaboration with Matt, how much of that style is adapting his, and how much of that is I don't know. I mean, like, does he give you notes? He's like, no, the eyes must be more bulbous. How does that dynamic work?
Well, with The Simpsons, the directors of the show basically over time developed all those do's and don'ts. And a lot of that came from Matt. Matt they would see an animatic come back from overseas, and, basically the way the episodes would go is that the U.S. team would design all the characters, do the storyboards, and then they would, ship what they did over to Korea, and then they would get the animatics back, which is, like the animation in rough form. And in the early days, sometimes it was really wrong. It was like the interpretation of what the designs were that were done here, just, it's kind of like they missed something. And so they would have to develop these sheets of notes, always, never cross the eyes. That was a big rule with The Simpsons, is like if somebody gets bonked on the head, or anything that in a normal cartoon would make the character's eyes cross. Matt's idea was go the opposite direction. So give them actually wall eyes. Give them a wall-eyed look, so that it's like this weird. Suddenly the brain's disconnected from the rest of the body. And so that was a rule. And there were all these things like Bart has to have 9 points of hair. Just certain stylistic things, because a lot of the animators in the early days would come from other studios and other shows. So if they had an animator who was used to drawing the Flintstones at Hanna-Barbera, and then suddenly they're drawing the Simpsons, there were sheets of notes about, don't give them this Fred Flintstone look, draw it more like this. So all of that is kind of drummed into you. And then by the time we started doing Futurama, Matt decided, I wanted to have pretty much the same look, but in his mind, Futurama was more based in our universe. So even though the characters still have the bulgy eyes and the overbites and no chins, he said, let's give them shoulders. So whereas you've got, like, if you look at Homer and Bart, they have this sort of thimble-shaped upper body with these teacup shirt sleeves and tubular arms. A very stylized, simplistic version of human anatomy. And so with Futurama, there's just a little more anatomy. Fry's got natural shoulders. If you look at Leela's arms, they're not just like a tube shape. She's actually got biceps and triceps and et cetera. So there's that. There's these little stylistic changes that Matt would inject into things as we went along.
And I feel like we're getting kind of a mix of both in Disenchantment, because it lends itself to the fantastical, but also the grounded.
Yeah, with Disenchantment, I worked on the first season of that show and also helped develop it visually. And Matt actually had, most of the way the characters look in the show, the main characters, Elfo, Lucy, Bean, Zog, he had drawings for those characters, but he wasn't really sure if he wanted to go with the traditional Matt Groening style with that show. So myself and a couple of other artists were given the task of doing exploration of different styles. So he gave me, I had the drawing of Elfo that he had done, and he said, try it, Disney style, try it Hanna-Barbera style, try it UPA, like the old 50s Mr. Magoo look. And so, I did hundreds of drawings of these characters in different styles. And ultimately, he looked at everything and was like, no, now that I've seen everything, I think I'm pretty confident that I want to just stick with the way I originally envisioned them. And so that's what we ended up with on Disenchantment. And I was kind of stunned at how great the designs work with the backgrounds, because he wanted to have like a real lush, almost Disney fairy tale style for the backgrounds, very rendered and, not just flat line and color. And I didn't really know if the simplicity of his style on the characters would look good against that. But as usual, Matt, what he had in his head actually worked and was great, and ended up being a fantastic look.
And as a guy who was in on the ground floor of Futurama, how did it feel for you when the show was resurrected, when it was brought back? I mean, the fandom for this show, man, it just never went away, despite what the Fox executives at the time thought.
Yeah, it was frustrating, the first original run of the series, because we quickly realized we were working on something that was really great. But the Fox execs didn't get it. They wanted The Simpsons. They wanted another Simpsons, and this wasn't it. I mean, it had a similar look, but The Simpsons is a family sitcom, and Futurama is an adult workplace comedy. And they just didn't see that. So when it came back, when the fan outcry was so great, and it came back on Comedy Central, first those 4 DVD movies, and then Comedy Central, it was really gratifying. I unfortunately I didn't get to work on that incarnation of the show because the budget was so low. I was working at Bongo, and they would have had to pay me extra to do what I had done on the original run to work on that show, and they just didn't have the budget for it. And to be honest, they didn't need me. They had already established a great look, and the original animators, the original writers, they were all back together again, and they didn't need somebody to do what I did at that point. But I did get to work on some of the merchandise art, which was really fun. And but just as a fan, it's funny because I worked on the show, and so I was, just part of the team. But I could also step outside of that and just be a fan and just be excited that the show's coming back, like I am now with the Hulu, the third bite at the apple.
Yeah, we're pretty stoked about that in the Stevens household too. My kids are gearing up for a new round of dad jokes. So it's well, Bill, we certainly appreciate the time that you spent, man. I could talk Simpsons and Futurama all day. I'm loving where Disenchantment is headed as well. But you got a lot of these things to get to, and I have to go give away some concert tickets here in a few. But, dude, we're going to see you at Capital City Comic-Con. Michigan guy coming, back to Michigan. Have you spent much time in Lansing?
I've spent a little bit of time in Lansing. I love it. I'm excited to come back, and it's going to be fun. It's great going to these conventions because there's always Simpsons and Futurama fans of the show, but you really get to see who the super fans are because they're the ones that also collect the comic books.
Right.
And I'm excited to meet the Lansing Bongo comic fans.
Hell yeah, absolutely. Bill, we look forward to seeing you here in a few weeks at the Lansing Center, man. Enjoy the rest of your day. Be well.
Thanks, you too. Take care.
Michigan's rock station, Q106.